Hello, hi, my name is Edgar. Thank you for joining me today. And my name is Edgar. I'm actually Executive Director of Crossroads Recovery Center. Just to let you know a little bit more about myself, I'm a licensed clinical social worker and also a Certified Addiction Treatment Counselor 4, which means I have my master's and I provide treatment for both clients that have mental illness and also substance use disorder. Today we're actually going to be covering a very important topic, is relapse prevention. Sometimes individuals say, you know what, I relapsed, I failed. And one thing I want you to know today is relapse does not mean that you have failed. If you have a family member, it does not mean that they have failed. I want to get that across today. You have a chronic illness, as you saw in some of the videos previously before, some of the shows that we've actually discussed what recovery is and what relapse is. So one thing I want to let you know is today we're going to give you a great education component on relapse prevention for all you out there struggling with addiction, and also for all family members out there that actually want to understand, why is my son, my daughter relapsing after they went to treatment? I want to let you know that relapse could be a part of the process of recovery. And one of the things is understanding this is a chronic illness. And the relapse, according to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, it tells us that with the chronic relapse, 40 to 60% of individuals in some form of treatment will relapse within the first few years. It's comparable to asthma, the statistics. It's also to high blood pressure, to diabetes type 1. All these illnesses, chronic illnesses, people are going to relapse. And relapse does not mean that you failed. Relapse actually means that you had a recurrence of the symptoms that came back for you. And what are the symptoms like? Compulsive behavior, maybe drug using. So I'm going to let you know today is a lot of good information regarding what is relapse prevention, what is addictive thinking, and a little bit of the recovery process. So this is more of an overview and introduction for those individuals that want to know more about how to prevent relapse, how to understand the relapse process, what does it look like? Because it's not something that happens spontaneous without any incident. You have to know your warning signs. Family members, know your warning signs of your loved ones. And who better than knows their warning signs than the loved ones? I come into counseling or therapy and I ask the family members, what do you think is going on? And they actually could tell the relapse even before it's happening. Maybe they couldn't understand what was the labels or the words you use, but they knew, my son, my daughter, they're going in the wrong direction. And today I'm going to actually give you some information about what to expect, what to look for, what are the basic components in treatment, so give you some hope to understand and be able to have the skills necessary today, or at least the basic fundamental skills for you to be successful in your recovery, in your long-term management of your chronic illness. And as you can see, there's basic principles when it comes to coming into treatment. And one of the basic principles is recovery from chemical dependency requires 4 basic things. One of the first things it requires is abstaining from alcohol and drugs. That's the first thing you need to do. And we covered that in last episode, where a lot of individuals believe that because they're sober, this is now them recovery. No, that's the prerequisite. In order to go into the recovery process, that's what you have to do. A lot of individuals, in order for them to start being able to recover, this is what is necessary from them. If you look at the next point is, you have to identify and change beliefs when it comes from addictive thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And think of addictive thoughts as anything in your brain that says, it's okay for me to use. Whatever excuse they could find, someone that uses drugs to continue their drug behavior. When I mean drug behavior, it doesn't only mean using, it can mean the lying, manipulation, not being on time. Whatever it might tell, that needs to be identified early in recovery and change these aspects so for us to have successful in recovery. The next thing that happens, if you look, is that you have to identify the changing addictive center lifestyle patterns. What does that look like? When it means identify changing addictive center lifestyle patterns, it actually means that you have to identify that you have to sleep. You have to eat. It's important to go to socialized activities with family and loved ones. These are the basic treatment principles. If your loved one, if you are not doing these things, then you're selling your recovery short and you're more prone to relapse. So this is going to give you a basic kind of understanding of what is required from you in order to prevent this chronic illness symptoms to reoccur. In other words, for relapse to happen. The last thing is depersonality belief system change, which means what you value has changed. I work with a lot of individuals, and when I do what is called a motivational interview, in which research says is really important as a clinician to learn how to do, when I'm doing the value card, I find out that some individuals have drug using, friends, as top of their value system. In order for us, in recovery, you have to change your value system. You have to understand what is really important to me and make value-based decision choices versus what I want, what my addictive thinking wants. So these are the 4 basic principles where you're looking for in your recovery process. Family members, also look at this because it's going to give you a roadmap of what needs to happen in a sense. And we're going to give you a little bit more information on that. Now, there's some individuals and some members say, Edgar, I'm just a chronic relapser. I relapse all the time. My family member relapse all the time. It doesn't have to be that way. And the way you prevent that is from understanding your own self, becoming aware. I got a text the other day from a client and asking me, why do I need to log my thoughts? Why do I need to be aware of these things if I know them already? It's really important. You cannot change what you cannot recognize. You cannot change what you don't understand. So these individuals are really prone to relapse. This is really important to look at it as an acronym. They tend to evade and deny. They move along, they deny they have a problem, it's not me. So it's really important to point out when a family member is denying. And denial is somewhat part of the recovery process because sometimes individuals cannot see the connection between my behavior and my drug using. So really understand and be understanding that this is going to happen. Stress. Individuals that are prone to relapse are highly stressed. That means they have a lot of things going on that's causing these physiological changes in their body. And what we know with a lot of the research out there, and you could Google up the research and look at how stress affects drug cravings. And we know when they're stressed, the body produces norepinephrine and releases cortisol in the brain. And one of the things that studies show about the brain-based disease is that when you have a lot of stress, they're going to have cravings. And so one of the things we know is relapse-prone individuals have constantly a lot of stress. If you notice also compulsive behavior, they tend to engage in a lot of behaviors and overdo it over and over and over. And that's what we call compulsive behaviors. It's something that is something that you do more than a few times. Something that, for example, could be coffee. You're drinking 4, 5, 6 cups of coffee. That's what we talk about compulsive behavior. And we'll give you more of a description of what that looks like as we go along in this presentation. Another thing they tend to do is avoid. Avoidance about their emotions, avoid about talking anything meaningful. They avoid their triggers or talking about their triggers. And this avoidance actually reinforces, because when you avoid something, you're going to run into it. What you don't want to talk about is going to consume you. So one of the things is those individuals tend to avoid it. If you notice, the next thing is they don't discuss their problems. They have multiple problems. And the last portion of it is they evade, deny, and recycle. A simple acronym called ESCAPE. These are the individuals that tend to relapse often. And this is something from the work from Terence Skorsky, which has done a lot of research and studying on relapse prevention with chemically dependent individuals and also criminal offenders. So I just want you to know that these are the individuals that are prone to relapsing. So you have to understand, what is the role of compulsive behavior? What is compulsive behavior? Am I doing compulsive behavior? How is it sabotaging my recovery process? How is it sabotaging my family members' recovery process? How is it making me prone to relapse? Well, this is the role that it actually plays. And the compulsive behavior is defined as an irresistible urge to do a certain act. And regardless of how rational the act is the desire to do it over and over and over again. The thing about these compulsive behaviors, they produce an intense excitement of emotional release, followed by long-term pain or discomfort. One of the things a lot of individuals with compulsive behavior is eating a lot. It can be a compulsive behavior. Exercising could be a compulsive behavior. Even sex could be a compulsive behavior. So what you do is any behavior that is done excessively could also turn. That's why a lot of individuals, after they stop using their main drug, they switch over to another type of drug, because this compulsive behavior fulfills the brain with dopamine, serotonin, whatever the chemicals of the brain that needs at the moment, it wants it more and more and more. And that's how the compulsive behavior in relapse is kind of connected. Now, the important part to understand is they remove us from true feelings. So these compulsive behaviors actually play a factor in us escaping. They're making us more prone to relapse. And over the long run, these compulsions can control your individual, can control the family member, and becoming unhealthy and destructive. So at the moment, the compulsive behavior says, well, at least I'm not using alcohol and drugs. Well, at least I am not overeating, whatever it might be. But eventually what happens is compulsive behavior consumes a life. They do it over and over and over until the point that it becomes very destructive. It could be done with anything. It could be done with reading. It could be done with gambling. It's this desire to do this behavior over and over that could actually sabotage your family members. So that's what I'm letting you know, is that the role of compulsive behavior in relapse plays an important factor. And I'm going to give you some more important components here. And many people who are in recovery from alcoholism or drug dependence or drug abuse attempt to substitute this for another drug. And hence, they start another problem. So in reality, they've just changed their addiction from one thing to another. And that tends to happen a lot in the recovery process. So if you know anyone that all of a sudden stopped using drugs, but then you find them spending too much time one activity, in their mind it might be, well, at least I'm not doing my drug. At least I'm not out there stealing, whatever it might be. Is a rationalization a lot of individuals use in recovery to continue that behavior. But one thing to understand is that the compulsive behavior leads to destruction. It leads to losing a lot of good relationships, losing your self-esteem, losing your own self-control. So you understand that compulsive behavior plays an important role in all this. A little bit more compulsive behaviors. These are all examples. Eating and dieting. This includes overeating, compulsive dieting, a combo of compulsive binge eating followed by compulsive dying or vomiting. This could be an extreme. Another thing is gambling. A lot of them just say, well, Edgar, I go into my casino, I do not drink or use drugs. I just go gamble on the weekends now. At least I'm not relapsing. Oh, the thing is, they might not be relapsing on their primary drug of choice, but maybe they are in that process. Because typically, as you'll learn today, relapse happens in steps by steps by steps by steps. Most of the time, your individual loved one will actually pick a certain behavior and little by little will lead them back to using. Good case, I had a client that she presented with a lot of codependency behavior, and codependency is a way for individuals to kind of cover, to maintain drug using behaviors for a loved one. And she's in recovery herself. But what she doesn't understand is, if I say you're on relapse mode, that means that you are showing behaviors, attitudes, emotions that are leading you back into using. She will say, no, Edgar, you are wrong. I am strong in recovery. I have over a year clean. Drinking is far behind me, and I don't want to do any of that. However, we understand that the first thing she's going to pick up is the codependency behavior, doing compulsively, checking, verifying, looking, all these behaviors to try to get control. Then that leads to a feeling of helplessness, hopelessness, anger. And then eventually for her, the anger leads to, I want to go drink, because the anger gets so intense. So sometimes relapse is not very clear cut. We have to learn what this means. And when it comes to this behavior, it's really important to understand that it could go sequentially. It happens that way. So relapse doesn't happen all of a sudden. It's something that sometimes without knowing, it's planned in the back of our mind. And because we fail to understand the process of relapse, a lot of us are going to fall to the relapse process. However, if you go to a good treatment center or you have a good counselor, he or she will help you create a relapse prevention plan, identifying all your triggers, either internal triggers, which means your emotions, maybe pain, whatever it might be, and your external triggers, maybe certain individuals, conflict. It's going to help you identify all these internal and external triggers that set the stage for relapse. As we'll go along, you'll discover what this means. Another one that I see a lot of people changing to is working and achieving. Compulsive need to keep busy or accomplish things or excel in everything you do. Now, in our society, working is seen as, this is wonderful. He's a hard worker. He works full-time, part-time. He's working 40, 60, 80 hours. Whoa, he's a really hard-working individual. What happens is a lot of individuals are in recovery. Then they go back to work and they work compulsively. Sometimes that work gets in the way of their recovery process because they spend most of the time working and tired. So say you're someone that uses meth, or you have a family member that uses meth. What tends to happen is you switch over to working because working makes us feel good, has some form of passion, enjoyment out of working, being in service of others, whatever your job might be. Now it becomes interfering because you're not going to your recovery meetings. You're not eating well. You're not taking care of yourself because you're overworking. And what happens is, little by little, your recovery gets thrown to the side. And one thing I want you to do is understand that this could prone you into getting cravings for meth, because eventually the body was not meant to work 60 plus hours a week like this. And what's going to happen is meth is going to kick in and say, figuratively speaking, is going to say, I know what's going to get you a little boost up. I know what's going to help give you more energy so you could produce. And that's how a craving might happen. So if you notice, these important compulsive behaviors are really important to understand the relapse process, because sometimes relapse is not as clear cut as I mentioned before. It could come out in ways you're not even aware of it, because that's what the addictive thinking is. The addictive thinking makes us believe things that are really not true sometimes, and we can sabotage our behavior. Another example of compulsive behavior is exercising. The compulsive need to stimulate the body through physical exertion. And I'm not talking about working out 2-3 times a week. I'm talking individuals that go to the gym on a daily basis, 2-3 hours a day, over and over and over. The body was not meant to keep, your knees were not meant to take such a beating in a workout, because that's what you're doing when you're working out. Yes, you're working out, it's helping you out, but every day, 2-3 hours a day, running, gym, lifting weights, that's gonna affect you physically, and pain's gonna happen. And when we know, one of the triggers for a lot of individuals is pain. And it's really important that sometimes these compulsive behaviors replace us talking to people, expressing the way we feel in other healthier manners. I'm not saying that exercise is a bad thing. I'm not saying that gambling is a bad thing. I'm not saying that all these behaviors that I've described are not a bad thing. It's in how we do them and in the excess that we do them. And so one thing to understand in the recovery process, in your own recovery process, your family process, is having a balance, doing a little bit of everything. Here we go, sex. The compulsion to stimulate the body through physical exertion. Sex feels good. Sex makes us happy. Sex takes away chronic, sometimes pain. Headaches, migraine studies have shown that if you have sex 2 or 3 times a week, it's definitely going to reduce your migraines. So one of the things to understand is, I'm not against sex. Have as much sex as you want. However, if you're in recovery, be very careful. You could replace your drug using with sex. And I see that happen sometimes. Individuals will go into a relationship, will have multiple partners. In their mind, addictive thinking says, at least I'm not having, or at least I'm not doing my drug. And so, but sometimes they don't realize that the brain connects whatever behavior you did with the drug. And sometimes just having sex compulsively could ignite that trigger to say, I want to use this. Especially if you're used to using some type of drug while you were using sex. It might stimulate this. Same thing with gambling. Thrill seeking. I see a lot of individuals in their recovery, they jump out of planes. This is the intense thrills and stress. It's because you're getting a lot of endorphins, you're getting a lot of these chemical release in your brain, and there's nothing wrong with thrill seeking. But some people do it over and over and put themselves in high-risk situations where they could physically get hurt, where they could hurt someone else. So it's really important to understand that what I'm trying to explain here, it does not mean that if you do these behaviors, it's compulsion. When I'm talking about sex, is this. Sex, if you do it 2-3 times a week, hey, good power. Even every day, good for you. But if you're doing it 2, 3, 4 times a day, you're missing work, you're getting late to work, you know what I mean? You're having pain now because of it. It's becoming a compulsion. But we have to look, especially in recovery, we have to look at what is this behavior, or how is this behavior affecting me? What is it doing to me? What am I avoiding here? What am I escaping? Because these are all a form of escape. And so understand, even though it might be healthier compared to the drug-using behavior, it's in the same kind of spectrum. So understand that role of compulsion behavior, because it's really important to understand, what am I overdoing? Am I reading over? Am I eye-sealing? Whatever you're doing, it could be compulsively. That's what goes to escape. The avoidance of daily routines of life. We tune out. Another thing that I've been watching that's been compulsion is, I don't know about you know this, but Netflix. You know, we call it binge watching, where we spend hours, 5 to 6 hours, watching a movie because back to back. Gaming could be another compulsive behavior. And another thing with gaming is the type of games that you're playing. So you're playing video games, you're playing Grand Theft Auto, where there's drug deals going on, all these different things. That's activating your brain to have these cravings. So understand that is not only these other behaviors, but you could use whatever behavior you can and escape. And that's what compulsions do. It helps you escape at that particular moment, and it helps you avoid whatever's going on with you. And especially in recovery, it's very crucial to understand why and how you're doing this to prevent a relapse from happening. Because these are the first signs. That's what will help you understand. Your brain's being consumed by something else over and over, that we stop paying attention to our relapse or our recovery process. One last thing is spending. The compulsivity to buy or acquire possessions could be compulsiveness. I've known people that enter sobriety, great individuals, and then they rack up a lot of credit card bills. And then the guilt comes in and the sadness come in and boom, then goes to a relapse process. So just understand that process is that, I hope you get the picture when I'm talking about compulsive behavior. Do the spending. Just when you do the spending, be careful that you're not seeking more than just the spending. The thrill of the checking, the feeling good, all these things could create a problem for you. So be careful when you do your spending, you're in recovery. These are little warning signs. They might not be a big deal at the moment, but if you continue these behaviors, it might lead to a problem. So these are the nuances I'm asking you to look at your family members or yourself if you're in that relapse process. Now, one thing to understand when it comes to compulsive behavior is that some individuals are unable to control their behavior because they're in denial. I don't have a problem. It's not that big of a deal. I was worse off before. They avoid the subject. Well, if you wouldn't do this, I wouldn't do that either. They make excuses or reasons in their own brain of why this behavior is okay. Understand that. So if you have your family member that is acting compulsively and you confront them, understand they might be in denial. They might say, oh, leave me alone, you run your own program. That's what people say. Or take someone else into inventory, which means leave me alone, worry about yourself. But sometimes individuals that are doing these compulsive behaviors don't understand that it's actually a problem for them. And it could potentially lead them to relapse again. And those small little things really make a huge difference. Could imagine yourself, if you catch yourself up here as the compulsive behavior is starting versus down here when you've already relapsed. It's easier to stop it up here than it is down here. And these are little nuances you want to look for with your family members or yourself that could help you prevent the compulsiveness. Now, another thing happens, thinking errors really impair how they're going to be able to control this and monitor their behavior. If they don't think there's a problem, they're not going to stop it. If anything, they'll get mad at you for getting in the way of this healthier behavior. At least I'm not using. I've seen a lot of individuals that at the beginning of the recovery process, they're going to 4, 5, 6 meetings a day, which is great. Eventually, I think it's important to reduce that and expand your comfort zone. Stay connected, but expand your comfort zone. So meetings could also be something compulsive where you hide from your family members. You might be embraced by people in recovery, but you avoid having lunch, having dinner with your family. And we use sometimes the excuse of, I need this for my recovery, you don't understand me. That could definitely happen. So an important thing to remember with compulsive behavior is having the balance. Now look at this little picture up here, which is kind of interesting. It says, compulsive behavior is not what you do, but how you do it. And I like doing it this way. This gives a clear example. Some of us like our coffee, but we like a coffee the whole day, 5 or 6 cups a day. And really important to understand that this is not a healthy behavior. I'm trying to make a little bit light of this, but understand that it could really damage your recovery process. It could really affect you physically if you overdo these things. So not only is it going to affect your recovery and probably make you more likely to relapse, but physically it's going to have a total and effect on you and your loved ones. Because imagine if you're spending all your time at meetings. You already were gone when you were using alcohol or drugs. Now you're in recovery and you're gone the whole day, all day morning, all day night. So now you're avoiding something. It's going to affect your relationship with your family members. They're not going to understand you, what's going on. So understand is having a nice balance to this. Finding what we call a positive outlet. And this positive outlet means that you're going to provide you some activity that's called pain-free pleasures. Imagine that. Something you could do in your recovery process that could help you feel well at the moment. In the long term, it does not have negative consequences. One of the things is it makes you feel good now without creating any pain later. These positive outlets, they enhance your reality. They help you move more effectively and cope with reality in life. So you're not denying, you're not escaping, you're not avoiding, you're confronting, you're managing, you're aware. But what stops us is this belief system. this sometimes distorted belief system that something's going on, something's going wrong, but sometimes the belief system doesn't even know anything's going wrong. Now, a belief system is anything that has to do with evaluating, perceiving, sensing, imagining, dreaming, anything you think about the past, present, or future. That is your belief system. It helps you see the world a certain way. It's your lenses for the world. There's some individuals that say that we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. So whatever is in my brain, whatever experience I've had, whatever I've seen, whatever I heard, whatever I did, it's going to affect my belief system. It's either going to make it stronger or is it going to make it weaker? Or is it going to, as it talks stronger, it's going to reinforce it. So the one thing that's important is belief systems are very strong. And sometimes these belief systems in recovery, or how we'll receive relapse to be, is they're very strong. So it's important to challenge your belief system. Have the open mind to, if a family member that maybe has never had a problem with alcohol and drugs, listen to them. One thing that's important to understand is do not judge the messenger, judge the message. Just because someone doesn't have an experience of alcohol or drugs doesn't mean they have a good message to give you, or a message of maybe, hey, I'm noticing these behaviors. It's important just to acknowledge that, and maybe that goes within your belief system, maybe it's not. So you have to understand that it's really important to start addressing your belief system in your recovery process. I'm going to ask you a few questions, true or false questions, and you answer them in your own mind, or you could ask your family members. It's a good game to play. Think of this as true or false. Relapse occurs spontaneously without warning. Is that true or false? If you've been paying attention to me, you know the answer to this one. What do you think it is? You ready? That's false. Relapse does not happen suddenly, spontaneously, without warnings. There are warning signs. It's sometimes we're not aware of our warning signs. What is your warning sign? What do you know that you're doing inside of yourself that you know this is not the right thing to do? It's really important to understand that all of a sudden you don't wake up in the morning and you end up at your connect's house. It doesn't work that way. There's certain things that you tend to think, do, feel before we pick up, before we use. Sometimes there's less obvious than others. Sometimes your family members know when your relapse process. I was going through a clinical meeting a few years ago, and when one of the individuals that I work with said, you know what, this client's on relapse mode. And we all looked at each other. He's like, you know what? She is on relapse mode. She's displaying the behavior when she was using. She's avoiding. All of a sudden, she's cured. So she's becoming overconfident. And all of a sudden, she uses. She drank alcohol. And she says, I don't know what happened. That girl was doing well. It's because, and she says, it just happened. All of a sudden, I was in a party, and I found myself drinking. I got drunk. It was just all of a sudden. No, it's not all of a sudden. There's warning signs you have to recognize. Sometimes it could be very obvious, and sometimes it could be very covert kind of warning signs that we have. We don't even aware of them. Other people see them, but we might not see them. This is false. I have another one for you. Recovery is abstinence from alcohol and drugs. Another question for you. Remember, be paying attention. The answer to this is false. Look at this one. Relapse is alcohol and drug use. A lot of individuals think, why relapse? This is alcohol or drug use. Do you think this is true or false? I'm not giving you the answer yet, but remember, relapse is alcohol and drug use. Do you think that's true or false? I have another one for you here. If you look up at the board, anytime I abstain from alcohol and drugs, I am in recovery because I am abstaining. Is this true or false? Anytime I return to alcohol and drug use, I am in relapse. Is this true or false? These are all belief systems that maintain the relapse process. These are all belief systems that could affect you, your recovery process. So are these true or false for you? As long as I don't use alcohol and drugs, I can control my behavior. And I control myself. What do you think of these belief systems in recovery? Are they true or are they false? These are mistaken beliefs. They are not true. So you can see why individuals tend to relapse when they have this belief system. If I think that anytime I return to alcohol and drug use, I'm in relapse, I'm only going to focus on my drink. But if I know that my behaviors, my thinking, my feeling are signs warning signs. The way I feel internally, these are all signs that I'm on a relapse process. Then guess what? I'm gonna stop up here. But if I think that relapse means picking up and using, that's when I want to relapse, I'm not gonna take a look at the other areas of my life to prevent a relapse from happening. If I think that anytime I abstain from alcohol, I'm in recovery, then that means I don't have to do anything else. As long as I say abstain, I'm fine. I'm not gonna have to work on my behaviors, on my attitudes, on my lifestyle. None of that has to change because I'm in recovery. So you can see how these beliefs could actually sabotage you without knowing they could sabotage you. And it's really important to understand as someone going in recovery, but also someone you have maybe in recovery to understand that recovery is a much more complex chronic disease than sometimes we think. It's not clear cut. You could actually know these things and then 6 months down the line, a month down the line, denial could come in. And it happens all of a sudden. These beliefs could pop up back again. And all of a sudden, what you knew when you came out of the treatment center no longer applied to you because you're cured. And one thing I want to drive today is this chronic illness, not only does it have behavioral components to it, but it also has psychological components to it. So we want to understand that these beliefs are really going to affect if you're going to actually be able to sustain this recovery process. A little bit more for you. Another people say abstinence is the only goal of recovery. That is not true. Recovery is much more than just abstaining from alcohol and drugs. It's much more than just staying away from people, places, things that trigger you or trigger your family member. It's much more than just not using. It's a set of managing, addressing who you are, people around you. It's like, look at the word recovery. It's to gain back. It's to obtain that person who you were before you were using. Also, to rediscover yourself in this process. Eliminate some of the behaviors. I would have to say that some of the individuals that I've done counseling therapy with, they say, I am blessed that I had this chronic illness because it gave me the opportunity to address some of the things that were going on in my life that I probably would have never addressed if I've never would have had this disease, this relapse. So one thing to look at is sometimes this could be a blessing in disguise. You get to know yourself a little bit more, get to understand more, get the psychological growth, the spiritual growth. The only way to lose control is to use alcohol or drugs. That's another belief. These are all mistaken beliefs. They are wrong. You don't lose control if you use drugs. You could use control even before you start using drugs. If we looked at the compulsive behaviors, you start losing control even before you pick up the drug of choice that you had. So you could actually even sabotage yourself without even knowing you're sabotaging yourself. If you're telling yourself right now, well, that's not really true. You know, I am in recovery. No. That is a form of denial. It's really important to understand that beliefs that are mistaken, you're going to act like they're the truth. So therefore, if you believe that simply not using will produce recovery, you'll be surprised at the dysfunction caused by the sobriety-based symptoms of addiction. And sobriety-based symptoms means also that the things that go along with sobriety, for example, the anger, difficulty managing your emotions, having to address relationship problems, the sleep problems, all these things that happen because of sobriety-based symptoms. So people say, well, Edgar, now that I'm preventing relapse and I'm in recovery, things should be better. No, they're not. That's another mistaken belief. No, things are not going to get better. If anything, you have to address the things that we've done wrong, the people that we've wronged. We have to address the guilt, the emotions. So people say, well, now that I'm in recovery, things should be better. And now people relapse because of that. No. Because your recovery doesn't guarantee, it increases the odds of things getting better with time, but we have to address those behaviors, the wrongs that we've committed with other individuals in our own selves, because these are sobriety-based symptoms. And you will understand that as we go along this. So what does this mean? You know, what do you ask? Okay, Edgar, what are you trying to tell me with this information? That if you have mistaken beliefs, it will prevent from effective problem solving needed to interrupt the cycle of drug use. Yes, if you don't understand that you have these what we call thinking errors or these harmful thoughts, and I mean harmful thoughts not because you're going to hurt yourself, I mean harmful thoughts because you're going to lead you back into using. These addictive thoughts are going to lead you back into using. You won't be able to use problem solving. If you don't think you have a problem, even after you finish treatment, or even before treatment, you're not going to interrupt the cycle of relapse. Yes, the cycle of relapse. There's things you're going to know right now that's going to help you go from one point to another, understand what this looks like. And when mistaken beliefs become truth, you act like it's the truth. So if you think this is all true, that you relapse, no warning signs, because it's going to happen, you're helpless in this. That means you will never ever be able to recover, ever stop using. If you believe that relapse happens spontaneous, drug uses happen spontaneous without any warning signs, what's the point of recovery? What's the point of treatment? Understand how strong these beliefs could be. They become your truth. And it's really important to understand that whatever you think to be true, that's what's going to be true for you. So one of the things is today is to kind of help chip away that belief system that is getting in the way of your recovery process, of your lifelong management of this chronic illness. Because remember, it is a brain-based disease. It affects your brain. So if it affects your brain, it's going to affect your thinking process. So we have to start making these unconscious choices conscious, which means you have to become aware of these belief systems and change them to increase your odds of long-term sobriety. It's really important to understand that. And look at this, these inappropriate behaviors lead you into a relapse cycle. And what does that mean is if you believe these inappropriate behaviors are true, then that's what's going to happen to you. And if that happens to you, then you're going to say, see, I was right. Example, the person says, you know, I all of a sudden, I went and drank. I didn't plan it, it just happened to me. If you believe that, and that happens to you, that's going to make that belief even stronger. See, it's true, Edgar. There's no warning signs here. But with counseling, especially at Crossroads Recovery Centers or any other place, they could give you the information you need. They could say, you know what we tend to do is, and this is a trained professional that is certified in addiction treatment that could walk you down the relapse cycle, the relapse process, could break down for you step by step what happened. What could you have done differently? What are your thinking behaviors that led to for you? Even before you picked up your pipe or you picked up your alcohol, what did you tell then? And then they'll address all the thinking process. They would put interventions. When I mean interventions, things you could have done to help you prevent at every point of your decision to continue on this relapse process. So one thing we're looking at is this going to help you have more control? This is going to help you be able to prevent relapse. Is like I said before, relapse is part of the process. 40-60% people relapse, and it doesn't mean they failed. It means you had a recurrence of symptoms came back. And when someone fails with their diabetes or hypertension, or when they fail with their asthma, it doesn't mean, oh, you failed, quit. That treatment that doctor's giving you was no good. No, it just means that your symptoms, you had a flare of symptoms that came back, and you have to tune or change your recovery treatment just to fit those changes. So this is the way it works. You have situations. They could be internal and external. And internal means you could feel angry, guilt, shame, happy, parties, high-risk situations, all things outside of yourself, and sometimes inside of yourself, which is problems with wife, boss, or internal and external triggers. That's what's going to activate our belief system. Because you know it or might not be aware of this, but we've created a belief system about drug usage. In your mind, if you're really honest with yourself and you ask yourself, why am I using? What do I get out of this drug when I know it takes away everything from me? There's a positive thing to it. It's when I'm doing anger management with people. I go, what's the point of being angry? Oh, no, it just destroys my life. It's no good. No, there's a pay value when you get angry. People listen to you. People perceive, or you perceive that respect you. You get the attention. You get release of this emotion. Same thing with anxiety. When I'm treating people with anxiety, they say, well, it only makes things worse for me. No, anxiety has a value. It helps you prevent other things from happening, anticipate other things from happening. Same thing with alcohol and other drugs. We have positive belief systems. You have to be aware, what are your positive beliefs about alcohol and drugs? So what's going to happen is you're going to have a situation, either internal, emotionally speaking, or externally, that's going to activate this belief system. Think of this as a seed that's inside of you that you don't think about this all the time, but it takes the perfect environment, situation to bring that belief system pop up. If you're not aware what it is, you're gonna be prone to continue to relapse. So you have to understand, what is your positive belief about alcohol or other drugs? Aaron Beck, actually he's a doctor, MD, he actually did a lot of studies with individuals, and he actually was able to kind of pinpoint this cycle. So we're gonna talk today about in cognitive therapy of substance abuse, using the Aaron Beck's model and how this plays a factor. Belief systems is something really important to understand, because they're going to be activated any time without knowing. And these are dormant inside of you. There's, like I mentioned before, they're sleeping. It's like a great giant waiting to come up and take control of you. So it's really important to slay this giant, is understand this giant, understand how it plays a part in your life, how it takes over your life, how you go into automatic pilot. In order for you to take back that control, you have to learn what your belief systems are. And you have to acknowledge, drugs work. Drugs help you do something. Now, a lot of people have this belief that in order for me to be okay physically, emotionally, psychologically, drugs help me do this. It keeps me balanced. It keeps me calm. It's a positive experience of need. And what we know is, if you predict a positive experience with alcohol and drugs, you're more likely to have a positive experience, because that's what you're expecting. The environment around you is expecting. Some individuals do this. They needed to maintain this, what we call equilibrium, things in balance. Make me feel normal, Edgar. Another thing is the expectation that it will help you improve socially. And it's gonna make you smarter. I get better grades when I'm using Edgar. All of a sudden, I am the life of the party. I could talk to people. My anxiety is low. This is a positive expectation that this alcohol will do this for you. Aaron Beck also talks about that the expectation that one will find pleasure and excitement from using. They work. People that use drugs use it because they know it works. It gives you the pleasure that you need, the excitement. It gives you that self-esteem boost. It gives you a lot of different things. So drugs play a huge factor. If you've never used drugs, it's really hard to understand, why does my family member use these drugs? Because they work. They work part of their brain. The problem is they damage their brain. If they damage their brain, like Dr. Amen says, they damage your life. It devastates your life. Little by little, it will take away everything that you want. And the brain will keep believing this is a good thing. It goes into survival mode. The beliefs that drugs will give you energy, will increase your power. You could do more. I have a lot of clients that work a lot, have really great jobs, long hours, but they use their meth in the morning with their coffee. Yes, with their coffee, to get a quick start. Because they believe, and rightly so, because of their experience, meth will give them an increased energy. Some other drugs will help them relax. Some, like marijuana, some strains of marijuana will help you calm down. The alcohol will relax. Just a few drinks after the work will help you kind of calm down. So it will have the opposite effect. It'll calm you down. So they work. And these are how strong the belief system could be. So we have to acknowledge the truth. I like this drug because of this, not just because it makes me feel good. Break it down more, understand beyond just making me feel good while we use these alcohol and drugs. It's gonna soothe me. It's gonna relax me. It's gonna calm me down. This is the expectation. That's what alcohol or other drugs might do for you. Alcohol is a depressant. We know that alcohol plays this factor. Some opiate users, same thing. It knocks them down. It calms them down. Some people, their thought process slow down, and they have this soothing effect, this comfortable effect, and they expect this from a drug. So they get something out of this. Another one, if you look at, is the assumption that drug will relieve boredom, anxiety, tension, and depression. So not only is it going to get rid of these emotions, at the same coin, it's going to augment, increase that excitement, that pleasure, the joy of what you're doing at that moment. But one thing to remember is that in the long term, these will rob you from this experience because your brain will be affected, will be damaged. But these are beliefs that people have, and they pop up. Well, at least I forget about it for an hour, Edgar. At least I don't have to worry about today. That's good enough for me. And remember when we talked about the first part of today's presentation is people tend to escape People that tend to be prone to relapse are escaping from something. They're running away from something. If you notice, some of the expectations either run away from something or running towards something, which is getting rid of the emotion towards a happier emotion. One last thing is here is the conviction that unless something is done to satisfy the craving or neutralize the distress, it will continue to definitely and possibly get worse. And that is not true. We know that if you have a craving, and it lasts there more than 30 seconds, you are consciously choosing to have it. What do you mean that you're consciously? No, I will try to get rid of it. The thing to understand is one becomes aware of it. We call this in the field glorifying it, or we call it euphoric recall, or romanticizing the high, which it comes in your brain and you start walking it through how it would be like if you would use or how it was before. If 30 seconds had passed and you become aware of it, change it. Just change what you're doing. However, if you look at this, the belief is if you don't do something to get rid of this craving or neutralize it, it's going to happen forever. No, that is not true. Cravings are like emotions sometimes. They come and go. They come and go. It's like a wave that when you first get it, it pulls you in. But as you resist the wave, it goes away little by little. So these beliefs are distorted. This is addictive thinking. These are your expectations of drug using. So family members know this, that your family members might have some, maybe 2 or 3 of these that are driving them into using. And so if they don't recognize this, what's going to happen is it's going to lead to the next part of it, which is automatic thoughts. An automatic thought is a thought just pop into your head. An automatic thought could be a daydream, a thought about the past, present, future, evaluation. These thoughts just come automatically. They bombard you from one another. And an example of an automatic thought would be is, I want to use. I need one right now. That's the automatic thought. And they come, studies, or some individuals believe they come from our belief system, but we really don't know where they come from, to be honest with you. They just pop up. And we have to learn to recognize the automatic thoughts. The beliefs might be a little bit more difficult to manage, but the automatic thoughts are the ones that are become to your awareness. These are things you tell yourself. Maybe I want to drink maybe just a 6-pack, whatever that might be. And when you have that, you have the thought for long enough, it's going to lead to the next part, which is a craving or an urge. And the craving means that you desire it. The urge means you want to go do something to fulfill that craving, that desire to go do something about it. And if you look at that's the process. So a lot of people say, well, avoid people, places, or things. Do not go to where people use. You be careful how you feel. But one thing to understand is you also have to learn to manage your belief system, change your belief system. If you notice in the early part of this segment was that we have to have change core personality traits, core beliefs, and this is one of them. And so what happens is that leads into permission beliefs. I'm gonna give myself permission. I'm gonna tell myself it's okay to use. One last hit. My probation's not gonna catch me. My parents just tested me yesterday, so they won't test me a few days from now. These are reasons you're telling yourself it's okay for me to use. I am not gonna get caught. This is all in the thought process and some behavior components to it. And some of us have 3 or 5 same core beliefs when it comes to permission beliefs. I have a lot of people that say, I will not get caught. They will not test me. I deserve it. Maybe I don't deserve to be in recovery. Whatever that might be, it's a permission belief. You're giving yourself a pat and say, it's okay for you to do it. You've done a great job. Or it might be, it's a way to continue the habit. So what happens, once you give yourself permission, it goes to the next stage, which is going and getting it. And that's what we call focus on instrumental strategies. You're focusing on things that are gonna make it easier for you to get it. And what happens is very interesting, is that this cycle might not happen as I'm telling you right now. This might happen in minutes, days, but what happened is all of a sudden you find yourself driving to the old neighborhood, driving by your old street, saying hi to people that you used to use with, but not with the intention of using at that particular moment. But now you asking questions, stopping by, and getting to, and you might not be aware that you're actually setting yourself to use, but this is how the process is going. And then eventually what's going to happen is you end up using. The relapse happens. And it starts, this is the cycle that starts. And it's really important to understand is, this is a cognitive cycle by Aaron Beck. There's other individuals that actually, this is more of the social learning kind of approach where your brain, your thinking behaviors get into affected. This is not really to say the disease model, but just give you a good understanding that how behaviorally, psychologically, this all works out for you. And one thing we'll look at is, it all ties back again, then the whole cycle begins again, internal, external, but it's really important to understand every aspect of this cycle. It's your life on the line. Is your job on the line? Is your family on the line? And sometimes a hard time understanding is, how is my loved one choosing this drug? One thing to understand is that it's very tied into the brain aspect, a very brain-based disease. And I keep saying that over and over because we need to hear it. Because it's really easy to say, my son, daughter, husband doesn't care about us anymore. No, they care. It's just their brain has been hijacked. And to understand what they're going through is really important as a family member. Doesn't make it excuses. However, it gives you a good awareness of what to look for. So what you have to do is you have to change your belief systems. You have to understand that recovery is not absence from alcohol or drugs. It's only a prerequisite of recovery. It's what you need to be in recovery. The next point is, remember, is recovery does not happen spontaneously without a warning sign. You have to understand what your warning signs are. To understand the relapse syndrome is really understand that if you have a rock and you start up here, it's really hard to stop the rock when it's down here. It's really easy to understand stop the rock when it's on top. So what we're looking at, the relapse syndrome is going to give you an understanding of what to look for internally and externally. A lot of individuals is what we call is internal dysfunction. This is where the wall takes place that we talked about last episode. And during this internal dysfunction, you're going to see a lot of things going inside of you, and you're going to notice things inside of your family members that are very apparent. You might just say, oh, that's just them being them. But important to understand is these are the things that happen to them is they have thought impairment. They don't think clearly. They have motion impairment, which means sometimes they overreact, underreact, they get angry, they get moody. They have memory problems. You tell them one thing, they forget it, they do other things, you think they're not paying attention, but they have memory problems. They have stress, high stress during this time, which sometimes they start having, drug dreams. They have sleep problems. They're not sleeping their hours, they're waking up at night. They have coordination problems. These are all what we call possible post-acute withdrawal syndromes. And we're going to have a whole segment on post-acute withdrawal syndromes so you can understand what that looks like for your families, look for yourself, help you understand why you feel the certain ways that you feel. So these are internal dysfunctions. Sometimes we, individuals that are in recovery, want to hide this. Don't want to tell a counselor, I'm not sleeping well, I'm making a lot of mistakes at work, my coordination's messed up, I'm really clumsy. We don't want to address these things. However, we know that these behaviors or these symptoms, these clear symptoms, mean that something's going wrong with you internally. So you have to be, or you will recommend that you be honest with yourself and others and say, I'm going through these things. I am having these thoughts. I can't concentrate as well as I used to. When I read something, I can't retain the information. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm getting confused. I'm just feeling tired all the time. I'm really emotional. I don't know why. I want to cry for whatever reason. I feel anxious, nervous, I feel restless. It's important for you to describe these things because these are potential warning signs. I'm not saying when you always have these, you're on relapse mode. But I'm saying if you're having these for 4 or 5 days consecutively and they don't stop, it's really important to start addressing this. Okay, what's going on with me? And we're going to talk about when post-acute withdrawal is what to do biologically, psychologically, socially to help you improve this area of your life. Today is more just to give you understanding of what that looks like for yourself. Then what happens is the internal dysfunction turns to external dysfunction. And this is something that Mr. Terence Skorsky actually researched and came up with these steps in this process. Denial returns. Avoidance and defensiveness happens. Crisis builds up. You feel stuck, can't move forward. Confusion over reaction. That's because this internal dysfunction has caused so many problems that we've let it build up and we say, no, I'm okay. When we know inside we're not okay. So your family members might see it, but you might not see it if you're in recovery. And because we've put off our problems, we don't address it, the crisis builds up. We feel stuck. And then we overreact to things. We get confused how to solve the problem. And then that leads to loss of control. And that affects depression, loss of behavior, which means now you're doing things you typically wouldn't do. This is where the compulsive behavior comes in. You don't recognize you've lost control. You get all defensive when they point out that you're not doing these things anymore. You're not doing things for your recovery. And all of a sudden, your options are reduced because the problems have been building up. And then here comes a relapse, a drug use. So these what we call a relapse syndrome. If you notice, the last part of this relapse syndrome, this cluster of symptoms, is using. So if you believe that using is relapse, you're incorrect. We know that there is signs, symptoms that you display even before you use. Sometimes we're not open to have our family members give us this feedback. Sometimes we're not even open to counselors give us, but know this happens. Understand that you have symptoms. You have things going on. Be open-minded. Sometimes we get overconfident in the recovery process that we shut everyone up. So you got to change belief system. And the actual recovery process involves completing an array of tasks to manage acute and post-acute withdrawal symptoms. And acute and post-acute withdrawal symptoms are what we mentioned, the internal dysfunction in the earlier screen. In other words, recovery is a lot more than simply just not using alcohol or drugs. It's a lot more than just that. That's what I really recommend, that if you're part of a treatment program that you're doing maybe just 30 days, that's not enough time. You need more time than that. 30 days, it just gives you an introduction to recovery. It just gives you an introduction to what your life needs to look like. If you're a chronic relapser, you have to address, maybe I have some of these distortions, some of these beliefs about recovery. So understand that if you're a chronic relapser, you might need maybe long-term. You might need a little bit more care than what you actually think. Address these ways of thinking that may affect you. There's a lot of reasons why you might be a chronic relapser. Who knows? What you could do is get professional help, address these behaviors, and acknowledge that I am a chronic relapser. What is going on with me? How am I more predisposed than other individuals? What am I doing? What am I not doing? To help you understand that maybe you have to change some belief systems. We have to change something, what's going on with you, to kind of help in the long-term process of managing this chronic illness. And recovery is biopsychosocial spiritual. This is something that when I went to a training with Roland Williams, he actually opened my eyes to this recovery process. What does this look like? What are the components of the recovery process look like? So one thing that we discuss is this recovery grid. This is something you could do by yourself at home. And if you're in recovery or in recovery for anything, from any major chronic illness, you could use this recovery grid to kind of help grade yourself. So what you do is, all these 4 squares are going to equal to 100 points. This is something you do for yourself. It's biological in nature. Rest. Are you sleeping the 8 hours, the 7 hours, at a minimum at 6 hours? Do you know how to shut down your brain a little bit? Are you exercising a few times out of the week? Are you have a nice balanced diet? Are you eating your 3 meals? Are you eating your calories? Are you taking your vitamins? Are you taking medical care for yourself? These are all aspects of long-term sobriety. These are relationship. There's relationship between biology and the recovery process. Are you getting rid of yourself of toxic substances? Are you minimizing the caffeine? What are you doing for yourself? What about, like I mentioned before, your nutrition? How does that look like for you? Are you eating what you need to? Are you eating greens and vegetables to give you the energy to recover? We know it, and then when we talk about brain-based foods, or when we talk about what kind of foods you want to eat for recovery, it's really important to understand. The next part here is social. Is you have romantic relationships. Can you build intimacy with someone? Can you trust individuals? Can you allow them to be part of your life? Are you doing these things? It's really important to understand that romantic relationships, some people don't recommend them in the first year, but if you already are in a relationship, what are you doing to increase that commitment, that intimacy level in your relationship? It's really important in your recovery process to do this. And sometimes if we have compulsive behaviors, that's going to interrupt your romantic relationship because you're going to get your needs met through the compulsive behaviors. Another aspect that goes along with this is friendships. Are you socializing with people that you enjoy? Are they helpful and positive to you? And I have a lot of individuals say, Edgar, I cannot leave my friends that I used with before. They've been there through thick and thin. How can I leave them? They've been there to the worst. I'm not asking you to leave anyone, What I'm asking you to do is to invite them to your new life of recovery. If they say no to you, then they're the ones telling you, I don't want to be part of your life. Invite them to recovery meetings. Invite them to these things that are going to help the recovery process. So I'm not asking you to let go of these friends that have been there to maybe witness death with you, maybe saved you from an overdose. Maybe they've taken the needle away from you and saved your life. I'm asking you to invite them to a recovery. And if they don't want to, let them know whenever you're ready for recovery, I want you part of my life. Because they're rejecting the recovery, not you. Family involvement. Are you eating with them at least once a week? Are you going out to family gatherings? Are you going to the parties, to the holidays that once maybe you avoided? Are you talking, engaging with your family? Are you reuniting with people you haven't talked to in years as part of your family? That's part of the recovery process. This is what recovery kind of looks like. Roland Williams, when he presented this, he put in really good basic terms of how to categorize your recovery process, because sometimes we need categorized to be able to see where we're at. Another thing that he mentioned was your support system. How are they? And then when it's a support system, how is your 12-step? Because really important to understand this, your family members love you unconditionally. They accept you. However, sometimes they cannot understand what it is or how it is like to be in this recovery process, what it is to face a cravings or relapse process. So you need someone in your support group that understands this. Sponsorship is really important in this aspect. And sponsorship does not mean someone that has just done drugs and now in recovery. Sponsorship means someone's going to guide you through the 12 steps. Someone's going to give you the information that you need that's going to help you make your amends, work the steps. When I mean work the steps is the 12-step, and we'll talk about the 12-step process in a few episodes in the future. However, they give you an understanding of what this is, and it's really important for the social support to be there, to be established for you. Another thing is, are you having fun? Are you enjoying yourself in this recovery process? You need to have fun. You need to be able to laugh, play. You need to have a good time. If you're not playing, having fun, you're going to be bored. And what happens to boredom? You end up relapsing. So it's important to have some fun in your recovery process. Enjoy yourself, laugh, play. It heals the body. Have as much fun as you can in this process. Sometimes you're going to have to do things you don't want to do in order to do the things you want to do. And sometimes along the way in your recovery process, because biologically your brain's been affected, you can't have a lot of fun. But keep pushing along. Keep pushing along, because eventually you will start to enjoy the things that you once did before. Or you try new things. And we know that as you're having fun in recovery, you'll sustain it. And the next part we're looking at here, solitude. It's not always about being around people. Can you enjoy being by yourself? You could lie to everyone, but can you lie to the person in the mirror, the one that's looking back at you? Can you be alone by yourself with your own thoughts? Sometimes these compulsive behaviors are a way for us not to deal with the thoughts that we have in our mind. Can you enjoy going to a movie on your own? Do things on your own. Think about that. Solitude is really important. A time of reflection, a time of meditation, where you could quiet your mind. So important to have solitude in the recovery process. So you're noticing recovery is just much more than just stop using. It's an array of components you have to take in consideration. So if you have a family, and this is usually in the readjustment stage of the recovery process that we talked about in the last episode. This is what your life is going to look like, how you want it to look like. See, one thing to understand is you are the creators of your recovery process. You are the creator of what's going to be good in your recovery, what you're going to enjoy in your recovery. Have fun, have love. You get to say, how I'm going to have solitude, how I'm going to eat, how I'm going to do things for your own self. So the great thing is you are creating all this for yourself. No one's telling you what you need to do, how to do it. This is something you have to do on your own. And if you need guidance, then seek guidance. Work's very important. Viktor Frankl talked about a book called Searching Meaning. And in his book, it mentions about how he was in the Nazi camp and how he was able to overcome certain things. And he's talking about the meaning. And one of the things he mentions is, maybe not in this book, but when we talk about is work, having some work that is meaningful for you, makes you feel good, being of service. Working is extremely important to feel good that you're providing for yourself, and that's part of the recovery process. Now, one thing to understand is Working could do many things for you. As you do one thing here, it might help with another areas. Working could also provide you support system, but also really important, where you're working might jeopardize your recovery system. So understand, does my work, the work that I'm doing or where I'm at, does it support my recovery or does it endanger my recovery? And those are the really important things to look at. Psychologically, the next is the part of do you understand stress? Do you understand your stressors? Do you identify how it affects your body, how to manage your stress in your life? Do you know how to do what we call progressive muscle relaxation, diaphragm breathing, meditation to manage these things? What are you doing to understand the stress, how to minimize stress, how to problem solve to manage your stress? Because stress could be something that could cause cravings and even a relapse. Are you aware of your emotions? Are you aware when you're feeling sad, lonely, tired? Are you aware of how to manage these emotions? Are you aware, in the scale of 1 to 10, how strong this emotion is and how to manage it? We call that emotional regulation. Identify your emotion, how intense you're feeling it, and how to change it. Are you psychologically capable of doing that? If you can't, you're higher risk for relapse. Understand that you have to manage emotions, manage the guilt, the sadness, the disappointment, the anxiety. Even happiness needs to be managed sometimes. So understand that aspect of when it comes to emotions. Do you have a sense of purpose? What is your meaning? Do you know what you want to do and do you look forward to doing it? That's really important. It doesn't have to be related to your work. It could be a volunteer. It could be something else that gives you totally meaning. Are you giving back to your recovery process? Are you talking to newcomers in recovery? What are you doing? Are you helping in your family? Whatever gives you a sense of purpose, you get to define that in the recovery grid. Core issues. Are you addressing some of the things in your past, in your life, that affect you tremendously? Sexual abuse, physical abuse, abandonment. Maybe you have deep-seated depression that needs to be treated with certain medication. Whatever it might be, whatever your core issue might be, do you have an undiagnosed another mental illness you're not even aware of? Understand those things. Maybe that's something that needs to be addressed. Maybe that's one of your core issues. And the thing is, are you challenging yourself? Are you doing new things? Are you reading new things? Are you learning? Are you growing? These are the things you have to look when you're intellectually challenging yourself. This is all part of the recovery process. Some of you are saying, man, Edgar, this seems like a lot of work. And when they're even done with the grid yet, it doesn't have to be a lot of work. See, if you have that thought, then you have to learn to manage your stress. And so important is to understand that that's a way of thinking that could impair, because this could be done on a daily basis. If you're hanging out with family, maybe that gives you a sense of purpose. Maybe you're hanging out eating with them. Now you did all three parts of the recovery grid. So this is think about the way you're thinking in your business, because that might jeopardize or might sabotage this recovery grid for you or your recovery process. How's your thinking? It doesn't have to be positive in nature. It could be a balanced thinking. Are you looking at the good, bad, and combining them? Because that gives you what we call a balanced thinking. Do you have gratitude thinking? Those are all important when it comes to psychological development in the recovery process. Do you recognize your addictive thinking? Understand how your thoughts affect your emotions. We'll have a whole segment on how thoughts affect your emotions. But it's really important to understand that you are aware of these things in your recovery grid. How's your self-image? When you see yourself in the mirror, how does that affect you? How does that make you feel? It's really important to understand how you see yourself in this process. Do you see yourself as someone worthy of doing this? It's really important to look at yourself and be honest with yourself and work on this self-image, because the way you see yourself will determine might determine how you react, what you do, who you hang out with, who you socialize, what do you do in your recovery process. So it's really important to understand how these are all connected. The last portion of the recovery grid is spirituality. How's your loyalty? Who are you loyal to? Are you loyal to your addiction? Are you loyal to your recovery process? Are you loyal to your family? Are you being honest? Are you being honest with yourself, honest with everyone else? There is a counselor that at Crossroads Recovery that states, and this is something that's said in many other recovery places, it's something that I hear from her, the first time I heard it was from her, is we're only as sick as our secrets. Secrets keep this addiction process continuing. We have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be honest in the way we feel, what we think. I don't like this program, I don't like this. So we could address it. Is when we keep everything to ourselves, when we escape. when we avoid, deny, that's what the problem. So are you being honest in your recovery with yourself and saying, family, you know what, I think of using right now. It doesn't mean you want to use, it just means that this is what you're thinking of. Are you being honest with this? Are you being impeccable with your word, like Don Miguel Ruiz talks about in the 4 agreements, being impeccable with your word. Do what you say and say what you do. Are you being loving to yourself, towards others? Are you accepting them? Are you understanding them? And the loving nature, you feel connected with individuals. It's a really important aspect of this. Are you loving what you're doing? Do you have this sense of internal warmness that comes along with loving? Are you respecting others? Are you respecting yourself? Are you understanding that everyone has a different program? Everyone has different things. Are you respecting other people's point of view or their view of what you're doing or not doing? Are you respecting your own point of view? Are you being conscientious how your behavior affects other individuals? Do you know that whatever you do has a ripple effect those around you? How's the kindness going for you? Are you being kind with yourself to others? These are all forms of spirituality. Are you accepting yourself and others for their flaws, for their greatness? It's one of the important components when it comes to being okay with other people. Are you taking people's inventories? Are you saying, this person's wrong with this is wrong with hers, but I'm okay? No, accept them. We all have flaws. I have plenty of flaws. Ask people that know me, and they'll tell you what my flaws are, and I accept my flaws. I embrace them because they make me. Accept your flaws. We all have them. They're wonderful, and they were given us for a reason. The next thing is, are you being understanding towards others and yourself? Are you understanding this is not going to be an easy process, but it's only as hard as you make it, which is kind of a contradictory in the statement, but you have to look at understanding that this is all possible. Are you understanding yourself, others? Are you attempting to understand instead of judge? Are you having joy? It is really important that you having this joy inside of you that makes you connected with people, knowing that you have connected to something greater than yourself. Some people might mean going to church. Are you going to church on a weekly basis, maybe a few times a week, maybe once or twice a week? Are you going to church? Are you hanging out with people? Are you using this spirituality? It could be going to church. It could be running your own spiritual program, whatever it might be looking for you. But is this something that you're doing for yourself? So this is recovery. So the way you do this is, if you look at the recovery grid, is for every single one, it's 25 points for each. And what Roland Williams talks about is that's going to add up to 100. And you are going to be the determining factor of where you want to be. If you notice, okay, Edgar, biologically, I am at 17. Socially, I have a great social life. I'm at 23. Psychologically, I'm at 20. Spirituality, I'm at, say, 7. So that lets you know, okay, these are areas I want to work on. This is the areas I want to address in my recovery process. And knowing once you do one for the other affects the other. And sometimes when we're in relapse mode, we stop doing these things, if you realize it. Once you're in relapse mode, you don't eat well, you don't take care of physically, you don't sleep, you don't have nutrition, you avoid family, you don't use your support system, you don't enjoy work anymore, you miss work, you're disrespectful, you're judgmental of other people, you stop managing your stress, your emotions. So if you take a monthly inventory or every 3 months, 6 months inventory where you're at, it's going to give you a good understanding if you're in a relapse process, where your numbers are at. Are they decreasing? Are they the same? Are they fluctuating? And that's okay if they're fluctuating, they're decreasing, as long as you're aware of them and you're constantly growing in the recovery process. And this is how one way to prevent relapse is taking an inventory with yourself, understanding where you're at. It's really, really important. And joy and non-judgmental is really important. Are you laughing? Same thing with, if you notice, joy, laughter, and having fun is really important in recovery. And are you having compassion for other individuals? Are you, what we call empathy? Are you putting yourself in their shoes? Are you realizing other people don't have to suffer? And that's when you know that you connect to those individuals, because you have that compassion of not wanting others to suffer. Now, we've talked about that some people are prone to recovery. They last a long time in recovery. Some people don't know why, but this is recovery prone style. These individuals tend to maintain sobriety for a very long time, recover for a long time. They tend to recognize what they're going through, the relapse process. They tend to accept that there's something going on and within themselves or around them that's going to jeopardize their recovery process. They might lead them into relapse process. They detach from the emotion and try to solve the problem. They try to look at, okay, am I doing something wrong? What's going on here? They ask for help. They respond with action. And this is something that Terence Gorski mentions in one of his books on sobriety. He does mention, this is the relapse prevention therapy with chemical dependent criminal offenders, and he mentions these things, is you have to have your radar on. Recognize, accept, detach, ask for help, and respond with action. So if you know something's going on with you, you recognize, you know what, I'm not sleeping well, I'm not eating well, I'm judging other people, I don't like going to my meetings. I accept that. I detach, okay, what's going on with me? Let me get some feedback from other people. I ask for help, you know what, the counselor, this is what's going on with me. For some reason, I don't want to come here. I don't think I need this anymore. And having an honest conversation. And then respond with action. Okay, I'm going to take what the feedback was given to me. I'm going to do something about it. They respond. They don't deny. They don't avoid. They don't recycle. Their radar is always on. And that's one thing I like about Terence Gorski, that he does recognize this addiction as a disease that affects us. So you could look up Terence Gorski on his website. It'll give you a lot of information. The next thing is the stages of recovery for yourself. And when it comes to early recovery, is you have to accept yourself as having a problem, learning from function to drugs and alcohol. So that's what thing, accept, I have this problem, and I'm going to learn to deal with it. Middle recovery, developing a healthy, balanced lifestyle. And late recovery, developing a healthy self-esteem, spiritual growth, healthy intimacy, and meaningful living. So these are all stages of recovery. I'm not going into detail. Today was to give you the information of how to relapse, what does recovery look like, and how if you have a good recovery program, you minimize the odds of relapsing. However, relapse means a recurrence of symptoms or a symptom that might lead you to using alcohol or drugs. So I want you to remember that relapse means a recurrence of symptoms. All right, so the stages of recovery, we talk about the late recovery and also the maintenance stage, staying sober, living productively. And this is something we do, and sometimes we could fluctuate back and forth. What I wanted you to know today is that relapse is something that tends to happen. Relapse means there's a reoccurrence of the addiction symptoms. And it means you can have 2 or 3 symptoms that come back if you're not aware of them. If you don't use your radar, you don't understand compulsive behaviors, how they manifest, obsessive thinking, which we didn't discuss that today, but obsessive thinking means thinking the same thing over and over, as we discussed in other episodes. It could lead to using again. And understand that in order to maintain your recovery process is understand these little changes that happen with me and being honest and addressing them, because this is a lifelong thing. I do want to say in closing that I want to thank you for attending this viewing and watching this. Hopefully it's been very educational, understanding. There's a lot of resources out there for you. You could look up Aaron Beck, that I used a lot of information from today. You could also look up Terence Gorski, also a lot of good information. The National Institute of Drug Abuse has a lot of great information, statistics on chronic illnesses, what relapse prevention. I guess what I'm trying to express to you is that you could prevent relapse. Relapse just doesn't happen. You don't have to be a victim per se. You could catch the symptoms early on and prevent them from getting worse, and with hopes of preventing you going back into addiction process. So I want you to understand that there's hope in this recovery process. That it doesn't mean because you relapse that you failed, if not at all. What it means is that we need to fine-tune a recovery program, understand what a recovery would benefit from looking like, and what to do. So today was to give you like a little framework of understanding education through this process. And this is something you learn at Crossroads Recovery Centers. This is something that you're going to be given as homework assignments. Another trimester is the same thing. We all somehow give the same message out, maybe in a different manner, but just understand that your life is worth it. You are worth it. Everyone is worth it. And thank you very much for joining us today, and have a great day. Thank you. God bless.